Welcome everyone. We're going to talk about medications today. We already gave a presentation last weekend on it. This is going to be slightly different because it's a different format. People ask different questions or no questions at all. And, there's so much to talk about. When I spoke at San Francisco Club, my aim was to make it digestible. And what does that mean? So I've given medicine talks in the past where I talk about specific diseases, and people get caught up in the weeds. So one medicine that will treat one disease might have a certain dosage. And then we talk about another disease maybe 10, 15 minutes later and has a different dosage of the same med. And they kind of transpose those two and they go, I thought you said this. And it's like, well, yes, we did say that for this medicine and for this disease. So I'm going to focus more on kind of what to do if you can't identify an illness, because that's the most common scenario we run into. Most of us can't name that many diseases. I don't know who I was talking with or where I was talking about it recently, but how many diseases can we even name as hobbyists? So we know there's hundreds and hundreds of different diseases and parasites. And I think on average we can name less than 10 for the average hobbyist. Even I would struggle. I've done it myself, and I kind of ask other people to do it on the spot. If you have time to think and you can Google a bit or use Wikipedia, sure, you can rattle off quite a few. Maybe you could get 30 or 40 if you really dug, and then know you're still missing hundreds. So I think most of it we can't diagnose, and as a hobbyist, we won't diagnose based on the equipment we have. I don't own a microscope. I definitely don't own one that would allow me to do gram staining to figure out which types of bacteria that we're running into. And I don't have the ability to run cultures of different fungal infections and bacterial cultures and stuff like that. So what we do is a lot of observation and then guessing. And the goal is to guess right as often as we can. And as a hobbyist, we use previous experience. So if you're brand new, you've got none. So you've just kind of got to sludge through it, research about it, and hope that you're guessing correctly. A very common thing for a new goldfish owner would be you see the breeding tubercles on the plates. So that would be like if there was salt kind of by my ears, you'd say, oh no, you're getting ick, because that's a symptom of ick. Except it's actually what the male goldfish put on, and other cyprins will do when they're in breeding mode. And so things like the fathead minnow and other stuff like that will do that. And it looks like ick to the untrained eye, but once you know that, oh, this fish does that and that's not ick, you can rule that out. So, a lot of it's going to be trial and error, and we've spent lots of time, as a hobbyist at this point. I guess I forget to qualify why I should even be talking about a lot of things that I talk about. Someone said here, I know you don't do shrimp a lot, but do you know about L.O.biopsidae? And I don't do shrimp a lot on YouTube, but there were many years of my life where basically breeding shrimp was my income. So, and that's back in, I would say, 2008, 2009, 2010, somewhere in that range. I don't remember exactly where I started, but, breeding tons of cherry shrimp and then other variants to sell on Aquabid and sell to stores and do all that breeding for profit stuff. So when it comes to meds, I have worked in a pet store for basically about 10 years. Now, we've been in business longer than, I was in the store for basically 4 or 5 years, and then previous to that, I ran a store for 5 years. And so when you work under different rules, so when I didn't own that store, I had to do things the way they wanted to do it. And when I had my own store, I can do it the way I want to do it. And so we were forced to do some things, but that was good as well, to find what worked for the previous owner, what they're used to, and what was actually working with certain types of fish. And so what we would find is certain fish always come in sick, or at least handle stress not very well. And some of those would be goldfish, all live bearers. We found that to be true. Anything that likes a lot of heat normally gets pretty cold when we're shipping it. So that'd be like discus, rams, apistogrammas. Those are, clown loaches. Those are the main ones I can think of that off the top of my head these are always going to be kind of a problem. Other things or other fish that we consider to be problematic fish would be scaleless fish, as we would call them in the hobby, and those are more sensitive fish. So things like knife fish, maybe something like glass catfish, puffer fish and loaches. Now everything technically has scales and skin and that kind of stuff, but they have a different type of structure, more, instead of like, if you can imagine arowana or a koi where they have nice big scales that you can see, think of these scaleless fish as more like skin. So if you were to magnify skin and look at it, it looks like scales, really, like it's all cells, and they're very small. And that's what these fish have going on as well. And different fish have different susceptibilities to them. And so something that is scaleless, if you will, can't fight off anchorworm nearly as well as koi with big scales that I would have to get in between the scales. And then when you go to treat that fish, you have different, different problems also of like those big scales now protect. If they can get underneath it, they're now protecting that anchorworm. And whereas a scaleless fish or other fish with different type of scale pattern wouldn't. So, that's part of what makes this so difficult is we're not just treating just dogs, just cats. We're treating a lot of these things that one medicine doesn't fit all. So even though they're all fish, even we know that saltwater and freshwater drastically different when it comes to medications. And I think that stems some of the problems we have with our medications in the hobby. And that is, I used this medicine and my fish got better from this disease. Now, the missing part there is, well, what fish was it? How long was the treatment? What other fish were in the tank? How bad was the treatment? Did we misdiagnose? Like, there's a bunch of things there. So, there are meds that I consider to be, how do I say that? Like, I can't say they don't work at all because there's some people that have great results, but I also can't say that they work really well. They definitely don't work well in my testing in bad situations where the infection is quite heavy. So things like Melafix, Pimafix, Herbtana, most of the herbal remedies are where I fall into that category. And for me, this is like taking airborne and other things while you're flying on a plane. They maybe will enhance the odds of me not getting sick, but if you have the flu, don't take airborne, right? So that's where I'm trying to put like those meds into a category of like very almost preventative, very early signs. Some of that stuff might work. But when we get to a point where we actually have a disease or a parasite, those are no longer strong enough. And like in my talk in San Francisco, I explained why. Why is it there are so many herbal remedies? Well, I'll get to that. Around the world currently, most medicines are heavily regulated. In the United States, we're still heavily regulated, but you can pay money to get past the regulation. What do I mean by that? It means you pay a permit fee, and now you can make a medicine, and for the entire year you can make that. Well, when meds start getting used improperly, now a lot of people would say, we're using meds improperly with fish. You can make that argument, yep, and we'll address that later. But the reality is, a lot of the fish medicines like a Maricin, I just bumped the camera, sorry about that, like a Maricin. This can be used for dogs, cats, humans, chickens, all kinds of stuff. And so much so that it's actually against the law. Once I hear that you're using Maricin, which is erythromycin, for anything other than fish designed by the package here, I can't legally sell it to you anymore. One of the most common uses for this is actually dipping chicken feet and stuff like that in. So you've got a farm and you've got some chicken foot fungus that's spreading through your flock. I don't know what you call a bunch of chickens. Maybe it's a flock. I don't know. And one of the ways is you would make up like a little container with erythromycin and water, and then one by one dip your chicken feet in there and kind of let it go, and that would kill the bacteria off. But you need a vet for that prescription, because what we would want is we would want that to be diagnosed, and we don't want to lose a whole herd, and correct dosages and stuff like that. And I would make the same case of, ideally we would have a vet doing all of that for us with fish as well. But in my experience, I've found there aren't that many wet vets, as they're called, wet vet or exotic vet, that actually know fish. In fact, we get a lot of calls from vets asking what we would do. So that puts us in a weird situation of, even if we could pay the couple $100s to figure out what's wrong with this fish, can they actually figure it out? And so our hobby is kind of forced into this weird zone of, we are the doctors, we're the pharmacists, and we have a lot of trial and error. And that's exactly what people who medicate meds don't want. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of meds start to go away. Things like methylene blue. It's been around forever. It's now no longer available. It can be... So one of the things that the FDA has done is they've made it so one ingredient drugs are very hard to release. So what does that mean? That means something like methylene blue, very difficult to make just methylene blue or just formaldehyde or just a single ingredient thing, because then that can be translated to other humans and other pets very easily. But when you mix it with something, so maybe you've got methylene blue and malachite green, now that becomes kind of a specific cocktail of drugs to treat a specific thing, and it's a lot less likely to cross over into other types of animals and humans. So that's why we've kind of lost methylene blue, is the permit got quite expensive, and that's why we're losing things like Quick Cure that was around for a very long time. And when methylene blue kind of fell out, there was only two manufacturers, and that was Mardel, which Fritz bought them, and it was a company called Cordon. I've heard rumors are still selling it, but I can't buy it, so we don't actually have any methylene blue to sell, which is unfortunate because it's really good at treating funguses and keeping eggs from fungusing. But the permit currently costs more than companies are willing to spend. So, I have to basically go, well, what if we can guarantee this much sales and this and that? And so far I haven't been able to convince anyone. That being said, we've been lucky in that we've had another company reach out and want to work with us with medicines. So there's potentially a partnership there if we want to go down that road to, can we sell enough of this medicine? Do we want to get into the game of the FDA's inspecting and permitting and all of that? So, it's a rough place to be. And so with all of those things that we've discussed, like why is this hard, or why are medicines going away, and why are companies developing herbal remedies? Well, an herbal remedy doesn't have to be overseen by the FDA. So not only do we have something like Maricin, where it's erythromycin, great antibiotic, super good. They can sell this in the United States, but they can't sell it in Canada. They can't sell it in the UK. They can't sell it in most countries because it requires a vet prescription. Now, if you make an herbal version of this, because it's not regulated, now you can sell it worldwide. So if you're a company going, we want to make medicines for aquariums, something you can sell worldwide is a lot more appealing than something that you can't. Now, from everything I've tested, I've yet to find one where, wow, this herbal remedy or this remedy that's not actually a drug works really well outside of just salt. Salt does do that. But there's a new one, I don't have it in front of me, but a company is developing a new type of ick medicine. We've been sent a gallon, we're going to try it, but every ick medicine we've tested in the past has not lived up to the standards when it's herbal. So we will, what am I trying to say here? There's things like garlic that are supposed to kill ick and that kind of stuff, but when you really look into some of the studies, the last one I read, which was a few years ago, so I'm probably misquoting it a bit, know that, and someone will find it and be like, you misquoted it. That's fine. But the gist of it was, the study tested resistance of ick to garlic. And basically, if you had someone cutting up garlic and putting it into, let's say, a pond facility, because they were testing at aquaculture, basically fish farms. You had someone doing it 8 hours a day, you couldn't get enough garlic into the water to actually kill the ick at the concentration it had to be. So that was what kind of skewed me into like not recommending garlic outside of, it's a stimulant in terms of attracting fish to eat, but in terms of it, some people have said like, oh, mince up garlic and put it into rapashi foods or soak other foods in it, and when the fish eats it, it then will excrete it. There might be something to that, but I don't think it's at a high enough level, or it's not understood well enough yet. There is, another company that's working with it, and I haven't had time to test it, and that is, I think it's like Dr. Bassler, and it's a German company, I believe, and they claim that they have meds that fight off ick. Same principle. The fish eats that food, and then the chemicals that are in it are excreted through basically their slime coat and out the pores of the fish, and that would cause it to kill off the ick. Great in principle, but I'm not sure that actually works yet because I haven't tried it, and it's a hard thing to try. You do a lot of A/B testing. What we do, and I'm further qualifying why I should talk about meds, is to find the meds that we do like, we would bring in shipments of fish and we would continually treat. So like this new ick medicine that they want us to try, and we're going to try, because if it is herbal and it can go worldwide, I would love to be able to recommend it, and everyone that can't buy from the US will have something besides salt to use. So we are going to test it. We just got it 2 days ago. But the test we're going to set up is we're going to have fish come in like we always do. We have the quarantine room at the store, and things like cardinal tetras. They're, for me, I guess I didn't name that earlier, but they are highly susceptible to ick typically. Anything in big numbers a lot of times, which guppies usually are, but neon tetras and cardinal tetras usually are high susceptibility to ick. And fin rot is, or a bacterial infection is the most common, but then it's ick a couple days later. So what we would do is we would basically take, if we've got a bag of 300, or like our wholesaler splits them up into like bags of 50, we would basically do A/B test one tank, which is the same tank on the same system with the same amount of water changes, same sponge filter, same food, all of that. The only thing we can see that is different would be the medicines we're going to use. We put tank A with 50 of them, we put tank B with 50 of them. We use the meds we normally use, which would be ICX and our quarantine trio on tank A, and then we would use the new medicine on tank B, and we would evaluate. And in the past, what we've seen happen is tank A with our meds that we like to use cures everything, in maybe 2 or 3 days, and then med B usually won't cure it, because even if it cured it at like day 5, that's still a cure. But in our experience, we didn't get that result. And so then if we got those bad results, we would then try it again next week, and we'd try it maybe up to 3 times. So we would also try switching A/B. So we would go, okay, next time let's put our meds in the right-hand tank and their meds in the left-hand tank, see if it was some kind of difference we can't see. And then we will also usually test, let's say we're 5 or 6 days in, it didn't cure it, and we had massive die-off. We use our meds to fix it. Then the next time we'll try it like 3 days. If it's not working again, we'll use our meds to fix it. And after about 2 or 3 attempts, usually that's well, if it can't do cardinal tetras, we don't want to do massive amounts of fish and go, we're losing half our fish. But that's the A/B testing we do, and it's what has worked well for us, and that's how we developed what meds we like to use. And so I'm going to talk about some meds and the ways we like to use them and how we got there. So originally, when I was working at a pet store that I managed but didn't own, we were having lots of problems with live bears. And at the time, I loved live bears. So we were always bringing in a lot. We were selling a lot because I loved guppies and I love to talk about guppies. But what was coming in from the wholesalers would be weak immune system. They would have been heavily crowded at the wholesaler. And when we get them, they have a lot of bacterial infections. And so we started using erythromycin with every batch of guppies that came in. And our survivability rate went from maybe 30% surviving to like 98% surviving, and by using the meds each time. So that was a great step up. And we also really found that to be useful with swordtails as well, and some of the other live bears. Platies, for the most part, always kind of came in pretty good. And we were using salt previous to that, but the salt, you couldn't always know what the salt level was. A TDS meter maybe, but in this store it had 300 aquariums, and you would have to kind of derive, well, how much nitrate is in there? We just did a water change. There's going to be, not meds, but chlorinator in there and all these things. So is that TDS the right amount of salt? Is that actually what's left in there correct or not? Where something like a Maricin, every time you're going to dose when they come in, and that's going to make sure you have the right amount. So that worked really well for what we were doing. So that was working really good. And then we would, if we ever ran into ick, we would always use ICX, which I've got right here. And Aquarium Solutions makes this, and which is Aquarium Solutions, same company as Akari. One of the reasons we really liked this, and this I want to say was developed, in my mind, I say 10 years, but I've been saying that for like 5 years, so it's probably like 15 years. Like 15 years ago, somewhere in the early 2000s, they made this product. And that's one of its benefits. Because it was made so recently, and I say so recently, 15 years to develop a med that's brand new is actually pretty good. Because it only hit the scene maybe 15 years ago, it hasn't built up a lot of resistance worldwide. So that means that farms aren't using it and that kind of stuff. So when we do dose it, it's pretty effective. And we always use that with fish that got ick at that store. And it worked pretty well. Every once in a while you'd find something that might be resistant, or we misdiagnosed, or we were missing some other factor, but it worked really well for us. Now, one of the things that comes up quite a bit when people order this from us or read the package, it says, somewhere it's going to say, you can only use it with, oh, it doesn't, I can't see here. Oh, basically, use Ultimate Water Conditioner, and basically they say you don't want to use it with something like Prime. Well, I can say from our results, at the store I worked at, we only used Prime because they could get it in big gallon jugs and that kind of stuff. And so ICX and Prime was used exclusively for 5 years straight, and we never noticed an adverse reaction. Doesn't mean there couldn't be with a different type of water or something like that. That can always be the case. But in the ways in which we used it at that store, and the way we're using it at our store currently, and the way I prescribe it to you guys, I have never noticed anything wrong. So I put that more on the we want you to buy our stuff, not so much it's actually harmful group of recommendations there. But at some point, we did learn that you'd bring in guppies or something that would have a bacterial infection. You would put in you put in Maricin or erythromycin, and then like the next day or the day afterwards, you would actually see that that they have ick. So then we'd have to treat with ick. And at the beginning, we started by changing water, but then we realized they'd still have a bacterial infection, so we stopped changing the water and just started adding ick meds. And what we found was that actually worked even better, in that, because if you treat ick and you leave bacterial wounds or flesh wounds behind, they can still get infected. And so having the antibiotic in there actually helped. So we started noticing that we didn't see any bad results from having these two in the water for the first day. Now, we would be following the ICX directions, which meant change water each day and redose. So we would be changing out the antibiotic. But eventually, what would happen is we'd be kind of understaffed, or we'd forget, or we'd be they looked good. Let's just let those meds sit in there and then hope for the best. And we kind of learned that the meds were more effective than just one day. Like they would lead you to believe. Like they want you, like on ICX, to maintain, somewhere on here it says, to maintain optimal ick killing potential, you can actually dose and treat this every 8 hours. And I don't doubt that it stays its most potent that way. But what I wonder is, how less potent is it? So at 2 days, is it 90% as potent? Is it 80? Is it 70? What we see is we don't see any difference to us. So what I mean by that is, if I do A/B testing, we've done this, right? We take 2 tanks and we get ick in both tanks. So the cardinals come in, they both have ick. We will treat once tank A, and we'll treat every day and water change every day on tank B. And we find that they get better at the same rate. So with knowing that one takes more money, more energy, and more things, and one doesn't, we choose the one that doesn't. Now, the trap you can fall into that we find, and this is a rule that we have for all of our employees and myself included, the first thing you do when you have a disease is clean the aquarium. So what does that mean? That means gravel vac. That means test the water and make sure that we don't have high nitrates. Like, let's reduce all stress factors we can. Also means if we have the wrong pH or anything like that going on, we need to reduce, or not reduce, but fix that as well. So first thing, get the base of your foundation, the water, good for the fish. Then we will add medicines in. Because if we don't do that, what happens is, you're adding in meds, and sometimes you're losing oxygen, and sometimes it can be, well, not sometimes, it's always kind of adding stress when you add meds. And that on top of what you've missed beforehand can really do some damage. And we'd be surprised how often we would go in and be like, oh, the fish is sick. All right, well, let us start cleaning. Like, wow, this tank was dirtier than we thought. Even though we had just cleaned it, it had more waste or more, just stuff in there that we thought. And so that would be our routine, and that's what we recommend. And we, like, our quarantine tanks get vacuumed quite often. And same thing in the store. Like if something was to outbreak out on the floor, first thing, gravel vac clean filtration, get everything kind of working optimally before we start adding in factors that could potentially hurt how things are running. I've got a sneeze sneaking up on me, so pardon me when it comes. So from there, what would happen is we would get these fish and we'd get them in, and let's say they didn't sell, which most fish sold, like neon tetras, cardinals, guppies, all of that would sell because they were very popular. But what about the fish that maybe did stick around for a while? So this store I used to work at was very heavily invested in African cichlids. And with 300 aquariums, if over 250 of them were African cichlids, we would definitely have some that wouldn't sell, especially like female peacocks and that type of stuff. They would sit around for a long time. And everything would be getting kind of fed every day, be feeding the same amount, and you'd get some fish that were like losing weight. And no matter how much we fed them, it just seemed like they never did quite as well. And that's where we started learning to deworm fish. We'd go, okay, well, maybe there's something inside them. And so we started using PRAZIPRO. And we saw that on the website. I've got some down in the sump there area. But it's called PRAZIPRO. It's made by Aquarium Solutions. So at the time we were, well, I should touch on that. Typically, it's easiest to mix medicines from the same manufacturer because they've done some work and they can tell you, is this med safe with this med? They can't tell you, is this med safe with some other med we never tested, right? So that's where we went with Aquarium Solutions PRAZIPRO. What that is, praziquantel, it's basically a dewormer. And so worms, intestinal worms and that type of stuff. And it'll also treat gill flukes and, a few other, it won't treat like anchor worm, it won't treat fish lice, but it will treat some other minor parasites. We found that we could then treat with that, and that would fix, well, it would start making it so that they'd start passing these internal tapeworms. Now, we eventually learned that you actually have to treat that more than once, because what happens is the fish passes the worms it has, but there's still eggs either in the aquarium that are going to be re-eaten by fish, or they've laid eggs inside of the fish and they haven't passed them, and the meds themselves can't kill the eggs. So when you're ever using a dewormer, you want to treat and then wait kind of 2 to 3 weeks. You're going to treat again, and that's going to get, you've got like a 95% chance you've gotten all of the parasite. Now, if you do it again after 2 or 3 weeks, that really puts you at that 99.9%. But, in big tanks and that kind of stuff can get very expensive. So do know that deworming fish is definitely one that you have to repeat. So, but we were using ICX, or we were using PRAZIPRO. It was working out well, starting to fix. These fish could start putting weight back on. And at some point, we just realized that, I think we just started testing, and we realized we could actually add that in. And this might have been when I had my own store. I was testing at home when I was importing some fish. But we learned that we could just add it in, and it worked. So the ICX and the PRAZIPRO being the same manufacturer seemed to work fine. And we had the Maricin. That worked fine as well. Then I think it was when I started doing YouTube, or at some point I was like, okay, I want to make the best medication combo or cocktail that anyone's ever seen. And I was wondering, like, what else can we add to this? We tried lots of other meds, and the combos were deadly, so they weren't good. And I hired, someone who was an actual ichthyologist, and he gives talks about diseases and parasites and all of that. And we got their advice. And salt's a really good one. He would have recommendations of other meds we can't get a hold of that are really good that could work with these, but that didn't help either. And so eventually we realized that something like General Cure was praziquantel, but also metronidazole. So I just decided, well, I'm going to try that with the blend. So, kind of went ICX and Maricin, and then we added the General Cure, and I never saw any adverse reaction from having the 3. Time to eat. So then we naturally kind of put that in. We were able to, deworm the fish, take care of minor gill fluke infestations. So yeah, internal tapeworms, gill flukes, funguses, because ICX handles fungus, bacterial infections, other funguses like mouth rot, or colominaris, which is a fungal / bacterial thing. All those meds take care of all of that. And so we were knocking out some of the most prevalent illnesses. Kind of think about if we had a pill that a human could take that would fight off the flu, the cold, a sore throat, all of that, right? Like that would cover like a lot of the stuff. You're like, great, we should just always have that on hand. So when we think we're getting sick, there it goes. That's kind of what we do with our medicines there, is we take care of all these very common things. But then there's tons of stuff we run into that there isn't common things for. So I'm going to finish up on how to use these before I go on to other diseases and talk about diseases specifically. But do know that all the meds that I'm showing right now, you can also use with salt, but salt will pretty much do most of what these meds would do. And these meds that I'm showing are plant and invertebrate safe, which is nice. The salt is not. So then we started, well, we didn't really start, but the prices of meds started going up because the FDA started cracking down and permits started going up. Products started getting more expensive. And API was getting very expensive, and we were selling insane amounts of it, and we were getting no help from them. So that's where we ended up switching to ParaCleanse. Now, ParaCleanse is made by Fritz, and it is the same active ingredient. So each pouch, this is the same as General Cure. Each little pouch in here, so there's pouches. They come in a packet. Each packet treats 10 gallons. So each pouch has 250 milligrams of metronidazole and 75 milligrams of praziquantel. Now, we tested this for many, many months with our blend of meds to make sure we saw nothing different when we were using it. Was great in testing, and so we made the move. Now, it's not like a huge savings unless you're buying this 20-pack. You do save quite a bit there, and we were able to upgrade our trio on the website. So our trio now treats 100 more gallons for internal tapeworms for the same price it always did. So that was a good thing. But being it's a little bit cheaper, made it a little bit more affordable. API is still a great company. They still make meds, and in a pinch, use what you got. But that's why we've been slowly switching things out. Both these used to be API products. Now this one's Mardel, which is owned by Fritz, and this one is just Fritz. And we get to offer you guys a better deal on the bulk packages. So that's what we've been doing. All right. So the way we use these meds, okay? So we've kind of gotten to this point, we're 30 minutes into this video, and we've explained lots of testing over many tanks. And so in a store, it's not uncommon to treat at least one aquarium every single day. And it might be as high as 10 or 20 aquariums every single day, especially based on time of year. But almost always, meds are being used in a store every day, or they should be, because it's really hard to have 100 aquariums and get fish in 2 times a week and not have something that is not doing absolutely great. So what we do, and this is different than what the instructions say, but there's 2 paths. There is, if there's an active infection, what does that mean? That means that you as the hobbyist or the employee, the person looking at the fish, can identify what's wrong with a reasonable doubt. You go, its fins are missing, looks like fin rot, pretty confident, right? Or it's covered in salt-looking things, probably ick, pretty confident. When there's an active infection that you can identify, then what we do, and what I recommend for you guys, is use the medicine that treats exactly that. So if it was ick, we would use ICX, and we would only treat ICX, and we would follow the bottle, and we would dose once a day, change water the next day, dose once a day, change water the next day. Typically, ICX, if you've diagnosed it correctly and you've caught it early in its life, takes up to 5 days to treat, and usually it gets worse for a couple days, then gets better after that slowly. Now, if you go over about 8 days and it's not looking better, you probably have misdiagnosed. So that would be my caveat there. Same thing with either of these meds. If you were treating an active, let's say you had I've got a clown loach that's super skinny, and he's doing much better now, but it's like clearly tapeworms and problems were being had there. Follow the directions, and for this one, you treat, and then 3 days later, you change water and treat again. Or water changes, you follow the directions. Same with erythromycin if you had really bad fin rot on your bed or something like that. You can identify the infection, You then treat it with the one medicine. Now, you have option B. Option B is what we do most of the time. And option B is we've got a lot of fish and we can't always diagnose what's going wrong with them. So if we bring in, let's say on an average order, there's 20 different species and a few thousand fish. We need to identify things quickly. We need to, if we brought 300 neon tetras in, how do we know that 5 of them don't have a bacterial infection that's going to spread by tomorrow morning? So what we do is we treat for all of the common illnesses. We actually use these 3 products all at the same time. And the way we do it, we don't, because it's not an active infection. We're reacting. We're preemptively treating. We put all 3 in at 1 dose. So that means for 10 gallons, it's 5 milliliters of Icex. It's 1 packet of each of these, and we let it sit. Okay? Now, if you have water changes, you're going to need to redose. Or automatic water changes, you have to redose. If you don't have automatic water changes, then you can just let it sit there. And we let it sit for 1 week. So in our system at the store, like out on the floor, it changes, up to 20% a day. And so these meds will lose strength by 20%, but we're doing kind of a preemptive thing. On those tanks out on the floor, usually we're only treating if it's like an active infection or we really didn't have the quarantine space. So that's a different scenario. But at home, you should have a quarantine tank, or like let's say this tank, what I would do is I just shut the water changes off and I let the meds sit there for a week, and that'll usually take care of most things. So now let's say people always ask like, well, what happens if you were treating for everything, for quarantining, fish shipped in, whatever's going on, and then you see an active infection. So now I can see ick. Then I recommend changing some water, re-upping on the ick meds, and following that treatment until you cure ick. Then you would follow up with deworming. So the way I treat illnesses, I kind of rank them. So bacterial infections would be like the #1 culprit. They can kill fish in a matter of hours. A very bad bacterial infection, it can eat the flesh off of a fish I've seen it where you bring fish in the morning, and before you leave for the night, if you didn't treat it correctly, it has consumed the fish essentially. You just see this open like wound of a fish, and I've seen it run through guppies really quick. So I consider bacterial infections the fastest ones to spread and the fastest one to kill fish. So that's the most deadly to me. After that, then it becomes things like ick, velvet, basically external parasites. They kill over the course of usually a couple of weeks. But a fish that gets ick or gets these parasites usually has a compromised immune system. So you might see them die a little bit earlier. Maybe they're getting beat up by another fish in your tank or something's going on there. But that usually, like ick won't kill overnight, won't kill in 8 hours. Usually ick is like, oh, well, after a battle of 3 or 4 weeks, it then died. Now we can kill it by overdosing meds or using the wrong meds or using very harsh meds. It's very easy for us to do that. But, so that's the second stage. And then the third stage. So the third stage would be internal tapeworms. Those are something that takes 6 months to a year to really have a big negative impact on fish. The smaller the fish, the sooner that happens. The larger the fish, the longer it takes. So we've got actually a long time to deworm goldfish and puffers and all this stuff we want to deworm. That's why I say that for last. So if you aren't going to do kind of the trio approach to it, I would definitely, when things land, use an antibiotic because it's highly likely that they get some bacteria going on just from being cramped in shipping and that kind of stuff. Then I would watch for ick. If ick never broke out, then maybe you're okay, but know that you could have a little bit of gill flukes or something like that. But luckily, usually the ParaCleanse or General Cure will take care of that. Now, when we come to treating internal tapeworms, just make sure that you repeat the dosage. And so what does that mean? That means even with the trio, right? So we put a dose and we let it sit for a week. We would have to wait 2 or 3 weeks between that treatment. Watch the feces. Does it look stringy? Is it looking better? Hopefully we see some improvement after, a week to 10 days. Then we're going to treat them again. And we've done water changes in between this. We've reset the tank, if you will. And so, again, if you're following my method of always kind of gravel vacuuming and checking water and doing all that before we put meds in, you'll be in a safe spot. So 2 or 3 weeks later, so if it's week 1 in the month and you treat them, for 7 days, then maybe treat them on the last day of the month. All right, treat them again for 7 days, let that sit, and then at the end of that next month, treat them again. And the reason you do this 2 to 3 times is because you can only attack the active tapeworm that's inside of it, and the eggs can't be attacked. And so a lot of people, that's the step they miss. They go, oh great, I fixed it. And it'll look like you fixed it because you've killed all the big tapeworms and all of that's gone. But then it takes not a long time, it takes a while for those eggs to hatch out and really start having the parasitic effect and weight loss on the fish. And so you can get like, oh man, I don't know, it seems like, I treated them for tapeworms, so it must not be that, it must be something else. And the reality is we just didn't understand the life cycle as a hobbyist. And that's my biggest criticism about Fritz, by the way, is I wish they would have pulled us in on this, because it says nothing about redosing down the road. And to me, I think that's a big mistake, because that makes them a lot more money because you're going to reuse it more. And two, it's not best for the hobbyist. So it was like a win-win situation of like hobbyists is going to do better and they're going to make more money. But, I'm hoping that down the road, I can convince them to change the packaging to repeat in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, something that they'll agree to. Because I believe that will really help the hobby. Because, right now, even, I gave him my feedback, and it says Paracleanse treats velvet, fish lice, and hole in the head. In my opinion of treating insane amounts of fish with general cure, and this limited for about 6 months. I've never seen it treat velvet, and I've never seen it treat fish lice. But I have lots of internal tapeworms, minor gill fluke infections. There are great uses for it, but I hate, and most companies do that. They just kind of go, well, on paper, this thing cures this, but does it? Does it in freshwater and in saltwater? Like, have you tested it? And I don't know if this one says what it treats. Body fungus, gill disease, and Popeye. I would say that's true for this. I would say that's fairly true. And then I think for Ick-X, I would have the same qualms with them. Treats ick, velvet. Oh god, I can never say this. Spirulogenisis and Trichlodinensis. I've never seen it treat velvet, and we've tried this 4 billion times. So what does treat velvet, you might ask? The only thing we've found reliable that will treat velvet is salt. And it's very high dosages, 1 tablespoon per gallon to do it. And even then, we only have success about 40% of the time. Usually the fish will give out before the velvet gives out. We thought we had it with, I said Copper Safe at the talk. It's not Copper Safe. It was Coopermine. That's what I was trying to think of. We thought we had it with Coopermine because we hit like a patch of velvet, and we cured like 5 different batches of velvet right away with Coopermine. Thought we found the golden ticket, but then over the course of like 30 treatments, it like 1 out of 10 was good. And that's what we have to do. We have to treat for long periods of time, because if we had just told everyone this is great, we're going to incorporate to everything, it doesn't always work that way. So we have to get lots of months of testing. And actually there's another med by Fritz we're testing right now that should be good, I think. But we want to run through all the tests. We've got to test, does it kill inverts? Does it do other things and that kind of stuff? So even though it's out on the market right now and they've done their own internal testing, we've established that, they do X, and as a hobbyist, we do Y. And, what's interesting is that med that they're using is salt and freshwater. So maybe they've done tons of saltwater, not much fresh, or maybe they've covered it all, but I always want to qualify the med with what we found. And so that way when you guys ask me questions, I can say, based on the test we ran and what we did, it does this, and not so much the package says this, because that was always my thing I hated the most when I was new hobbyist, when I would ask a question and then someone would go, well, hold on. Yes, it says right here it treats gill disease. It's like, well, I read the package. I want to know, have you treated gill disease with it? Have you had success with this? Not just what the package says. And so I try to do that with all the products we sell. Well, I shouldn't say try. I do that with all the products we sell, as I actually use them and try them and break them and figure out how to make them better. And that's, that's the personal shopping experience of Aquarium Co-op, is we won't just sell it if we don't agree with it. We want to actually be educated about it. we send samples, and so usually stuff comes to me first. If it makes my round of testing, then it goes to like store use and some other testers like Dean and Randy. And if that comes back good, then we start sending some to Jimmy and Candy and get their feedback, but also want to get them, like Jimmy takes pictures, Candy needs to learn how to use it. So when you guys ask questions, she's more well-versed about it. And when she runs into questions, she can ask me about it. And from there, we can actually launch a product that makes sense. And so not too many products make it past that. In fact, we currently are getting rid of more products than we were bringing on. But that's further curating the selection. People always ask, like, why don't you add more? And it's like, well, we're finding that you don't need this because this covers it. Like in a perfect world, if you just had to buy one product and it did everything for an aquarium, that'd be really great. So we're narrowing things down. When a product comes out that'll handle two things, we can take two things out and condense it into one and consolidate your guys' money and spending and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to hop into the chat for a minute and then we'll start talking about diseases if you guys want, or tackling some individual problems you guys have going. I know we've got some new members. Where does that say? They've updated the whole new screen and everything, and yeah, so I've got buttons too. I can insert an ad. I can create a video highlight. I can share the stream. By the way, I am live. Let me hit the button. Thanks, Twitter people. I forgot about you. Tell them right now. Twitter notification out. But there's no... Usually, it would have a different window that would show me all the members. So right now, I've got Rafter DS. Thank you very much. We've got Renee and Michael. I'm scrolling up. I'm probably missing some. I already feel bad. Patrick Shaw joined earlier, and Parker Aquatics. Thank you all. And when you become a member, you get a few benefits. The few benefits would be access to emojis. You get some behind-the-scene content. I don't really promise anything, but I try to uphold. So what does that mean? That means I have the best intentions to provide you guys content, but if I get super busy and things go wrong, don't hold me liable for it. So like last month when I was in Florida, I went and visited one of my fish geek idols and put up that video about it, and it was really raw, just done from my cell phone, 20 minutes. It was kind of a mess, but if you're a fish nerd, you probably enjoyed it. So it's stuff like that, where I'm never going to take like, oh, this was going to be a full-blown production, and now I'm going to hide it for the members. That's not what we're doing at all. And one thing I did think about was possibly streaming or filming my talks that I do. Not that I do a lot of them in person anymore, but like at San Francisco, I thought, oh, I should have taped my med talk, and then I could have put it up for the members. Now, that being said, you're going, well, now you're holding information. No. I had still planned to do this live stream, and we have a dedicated video coming out about some meds coming out. So those are still planned things. That was like an afterthought. And that's why I didn't do it. I didn't bring any equipment to do it. But I thought, oh, yeah, when I go and speak, I could either live stream that or record it and upload it later for like the members only stuff, because it's a very low budget. All the lights come down and you're looking at a screen and you might not be able to hear me. There might be someone eating a bag of Doritos right next to the camera that I can't do anything about. So yeah, those are little benefits I try to add in there for you guys. It's just a little bit extra. All right. I've been fighting Camellinus codi for 1.5 months now. Camellinus codi. I don't know of the codi. I know the Camellinus redworm. And yes, I'm testing a medicine that's supposed to help with that. So that's the med that I'm testing is going to, supposed to help with that. But the things I need to test is A, is it actually getting rid of the Camellinus redworm? B, is it invert safe, right? C, one of the reasons people use that med is to get rid of planaria. So right now, my fish room looks like a bomb went off. It looks bad. But I've intentionally been growing planaria. I've got tons of shrimp. I've got these tanks to test on, and I'm going to do that. So after today, I'm actually going to treat the 800-gallon with this new product. Now, it's a little bit dicey in the fact that I haven't extensively tested it. I've used the active ingredient before, but I want to be able to say, like, we ran the meds through here, and I want to clean them out a little bit more too, so that's helpful. But I want to run the meds through there. I've got those test tanks in the fish studio that I've been intentionally trying to grow planaria and do all these things with. And if everything goes right, it'll kill the planaria, the snails won't die, the shrimp won't die. We still need to track down some Camellianus redworm for us to test on. And we're going to need several like groups of those fish, because just because I can treat one type of fish with the med and it gets rid of Camellianus redworm doesn't mean it would always treat all fish, right? So we want to be thorough with that before I make a claim of like, you guys should all buy this, it's amazing. And so even though that med is out on the market right now, we don't sell it yet. Now I'm hoping in the next month to 6 weeks, something like that, we will, be able to do that. I think if it passes the test on the 800 gallon, it doesn't kill inverts. Well, it's not that it can't kill inverts. I need to know if it does. If it does kill inverts, I want to be very specific in the way we market it, of like, don't use it with snails, don't use it with shrimp. And because that med in the past when I've tested it, not by this company, but in general, usually you lost the snails at like 10 days later or something like that. And so I think in a lab setting, people might not notice that as much. Like, oh, we cured the fish, snails didn't die, but 10 days later might be missed. Ken's medicated flakes. I'm not a fan of medicated foods. A couple of reasons. First, a lot of meds don't taste very good, so fish don't want to eat them. So that's one problem we have. The second is, imagine we need to treat the aquarium behind me, and you saw the auto feeder go off, right? So food goes in. How do we control that this fish might only have eaten 2 pellets and a fish over here ate 27 pellets, right? So you could get some fish overdosing. You could get some fish underdosing, and therefore maybe get sick from it, doesn't get cured from it, and then in a perfect world, they all get the right amount and they all get cured. That sounds amazing. So I tend to treat water column because that's the one constant of like, well, I can make sure that this concentration is in the water and it should be brought into the fish all equally. And that's the way I typically focus, because it's not that you can't feed fish meds, it's that I myself have no idea. Like, so if we look at the Paracleanse, for instance, one packet treats 10 gallons of water, right? It has 250 milligrams of metronidazole and 75 milligrams of praziquantel. If that 10 gallon has 10 neon tetras, how do you make sure that they get 1/10 of each of those into their bodies? And is 1/10 too strong? Like, what if that's too strong and there's some other outside factor of like, oh, well, they only absorb at this rate through their body. So that's where I'm hesitant. There used to be a manufacturer of meds, and this was before I really got into the hobby, so it would have been like 20 years ago or more. And they actually did have these gel foods that had erythromycin in it, had metronidazole in it, and they had dosing instructions of, to the weight of the fish, try to get this much into them. That was super helpful, but I think it was called Aquagel, I think. Yeah. But no one really did it because it was hard to get fish to eat meds, especially things like predators. Like if you have, a big doveye cichlid that only wants to eat really meaty stuff, then getting it to eat some gel is really hard to do. So it was a great product for some, and I know one of the local people we had at the time would use it. He would always take basically the deworming med in a syringe and just kind of put it straight into the mouth of a Plecostomus, it's wild caught, and not fill its belly, but put enough in there, and that would really work well at deworming them. But your average person doesn't do that. So that's where I'm not so much on board with medicated foods in the current way they are, like flakes and pellets and that kind of stuff. And then it comes down to storage issues and how hot did they get when they were being made and that kind of stuff, which that's one of the biggest things, by the way, is how meds are stored and shipped. And meds are temperature sensitive, like like this ICX, right? Store above 60 Fahrenheit and below 110 when not in use. I know that it can go through periods shortly where it's like, oh, it froze and then comes back out. But, if it sat at 120 degrees for weeks and weeks and weeks in a warehouse somewhere, like that's probably not pretty good. So, and I know that other meds can be very temperature sensitive, and typically when you're making foods, you can get them pretty hot. So that's my review, if you will. And this comes from, I've tested a bunch of medicated foods, by the way. I would love it if we could just feed a food and it worked really well. One of the closest ones was the New Life Spectrum one, but even then it was really hard to control how much went to each fish, and that was the biggest problem I had. All right, African tank. One fish got hole in the head overnight, skinny, cloudy eyes, treated with erythromycin and general cure twice, didn't help. Currently treating another fish with red sores with erythromycin. Where do I go next for parasites? So this is where I believe most people can't diagnose disease. Like, a fish doesn't just get hole in the head overnight and skinny and a clouded eye. Those usually, there's symptoms going on in that aquarium. It was getting bullied, or it already had slightly a cloudy eye, but it wasn't enough for us to see it. Skinny takes a long time to get. It means it's been underweight, maybe didn't get enough food, maybe it was having internal tapeworms. Hole in the head has two causes for it. It can either be a parasite or it can be a nutrient deficiency. So most often in things that aren't wild caught, it is actually a nutrient deficiency. So if it had internal tapeworms and it was getting skinny, and let's say it was getting bullied by another fish, wasn't getting that much food, the food it was getting, a parasite was digesting part of it. The result of that could be hole in the head, because now it's getting pitting going on because there's not enough nutrients in it. So how would I treat this fish? We'll fast forward to there. How does Corey treat that fish? That fish right there I would take and I would put it in its own 10-gallon tank. It's got a cloudy eye, it's skinny, and hole in the head. So I personally would give it erythromycin, so Maricin, and I would give it some general cure. I would give it one treatment, one packet of each in that 10-gallon tank. I'd let that sit for like a week. Then what I would do is, I think I have it. Let me see if I have it real quick. I do have it because I've been using it. And we're sold out of this, by the way, because all of our wholesalers are sold out as well. But when it comes back in stock, Vitachem. So then what I would be doing with an African cichlid, you're probably feeding it some pellets. As long as it's still eating, I would soak the pellets in Vitachem. So basically it is lots of vitamins, and if I read the package for you, a complete vitamin supplement for freshwater and aquatic animals. But in general, if you look at the back, it just has tons of vitamins in it, right? So we're going to take a good quality food, we're going to soak it in more vitamins, and we're going to get it to eat it. And the pits on the head are probably never going to go away, but they can heal over and there'll be some indents. And once you start packing on the food and you get it really healthy, then you can introduce it back to the colony eventually. And so most people, though, like, wow, it takes like 2 to 3 months to really pull it off. Like, yes, it is quite a bit of work to fix a fish like that, especially with that many things going wrong. The other thing you could do is, for the cloudy eye, if you didn't want to use the Maricin Mardel, you could just use some salt. That would clear up the cloudy eye. Typically, that is a little bit of bacteria going on there, and salt will treat that as well. You could probably go with 1 per 2 gallons. African cichlids are pretty salt tolerant. So next, you have another fish with red sores, and you're treating it with erythromycin. That usually would be one of the great things to do. You could also put some salt in there if you don't have live plants. Salt is a great antibiotic as well, and long-term, cheap, and will help heal that up. For parasites, if we're talking about those internal worms, I would continue to use Paracleanse, because it sounds like that's like basically you need metronidazole and praziquantel. Those are the two meds that really do a lot there. And unless you can identify Camellias redworm, in which case you would need something with levamisole in it. So I realize that there's kind of a lot there just in those two fish. But that's where it kind of gets labor intensive to start treating things. And this is only how I would do it. It's not the only way to do it. There's other ways to do it, but that's how I would treat that. Got some new members in from David and Edwin. Thank you very much. All right. So Mean Mug Aquatic says, a YouTuber had a video the other day and he feels ICX is activated. So hold on. He feels ICX is activated, maybe you're trying to say above or temps over 80 degrees. And that's why they tell you to raise the temperature, and it won't work at temperatures like 70. Any thoughts on that? Sure. So I definitely have used ICX on temps below 70 for sure. So we sell ICX. They also have pond ICX. Ponds are pretty much never above 80. So this goes into life cycle and best practices and stuff. So everything on the planet works this way, but at 70 degrees, let's say, it reproduces, and I'm just going to pick a time length. It's not necessarily true, but let's say at 70 degrees, ick attaches to the host, drops off, and hatches back out every 48 hours. Let's say that process takes 48 hours to go, I'm 1 cyst, I dropped off, I hatched into 5 cysts, and now I've attached to the fish. That takes 48 hours to make that happen. At 80 degrees, typically every 10 degrees, and there's a whole theory on this, and I forget what it's called, but basically every 10 degrees you change something in life, it will hasten it by like 50% or whatever. So at 80, what would happen is it would detach from the fish, fall down, that cyst would hatch into 5 and attach in 24 hours. So that effectively is going to reduce the amount of time you need to treat your fish by half by raising the temperature. Now that sounds great until you get fish that don't do well in hot temperatures. So like these goldfish don't love being at 80. The other complicated thing you get as well, so for treating ick itself, some strains can be taken out by just hot temperatures alone. So at 85, 86, that over a period of time will just kill ick also. But that also might kill your goldfish. So part of that, well, for sure I should say, this is all of my experiences, and I'm sure I will make statements in this video that taken out of context would be untrue. So I don't know if this other YouTuber, we could be pulling this statement out of like a whole thesis, and therefore it can't stand by itself, but maybe in the whole spiel of it, it was true. And so, but just on that sentence that was provided to me, yes, raising the temperature will speed up the life cycle of ick, but no, ICX is not, it's not that it doesn't work below that. And we've definitely used this on tons of ponds. Now, that being said, there is a threshold, and what they're saying here is 60 degrees. Don't store it below 60, but it's not, almost nothing in the med world and this kind of stuff is like a line. It's not that it wouldn't do anything at 60, but what if it loses 30% effectiveness at 55 degrees, in which case you're going to need to use 30% more or whatever. And it could be lose all effectiveness at 59 degrees. I don't know enough to know, but in general, what I've noticed is water temps just have an effect on the life cycle of stuff and not so much the meds themselves. Now, outside of you go really, really hot, really can be averse to meds for sure. All right. E. Ryberg joined up. Thanks for joining up. Is Nubius rot caused by bacteria or fungus? And if so, is there a fish med that can remove it? In our testing, we can't decipher. So we've tested antibiotics. We've tested antifungal stuff. We've tested hydrogen peroxide. We've tried salt water, like mild doses of salt water. We've had farms try things. So far, from everyone I talk to, no one can actually stop a Nubius rot. We're not 100% on what causes it. We're not 100% on what gets rid of it. It doesn't seem to necessarily spread. Yeah, so the answer is we don't know. Let's see. Following up on the gentleman that had the African cichlid, he said, forgot to mention, fed Hex Shield for a while too, along with salt. My wife actually noticed a hole in the head, so it may have been a while. No other fish showing symptoms. It's expensive to treat the 90 gallon. Yes, so that's why my advice is roll on down to a chain store or something, pick up that 10 gallon, look on Craigslist, garage sale, like get 10 gallons, make it easy. Like this package will treat 240 gallons, and that will be on your 90 gallon, 2.5 treatments. But on a 10 gallon, that's 24 treatments. So you can see the scale. Like once you own a 10 gallon, you need to treat a specific fish. It scales so much better. Likewise, In this tank, if I leave all the fish in there, which I normally do, all of a sudden, now I got to use 3 and some change on these to do that. So it's much more expensive for me to do that. But like in my situation, I don't necessarily have, oh, I got to have 26 10-gallon tanks, or I got to, my fish are actually big. And with one African cichlid, with just one, like I guess that's the difference. The difference is I need to treat all of these. You just need to treat one of yours. Unless you do think that the internal tapeworms are affecting all of your fish, in which case then I do recommend treating your entire 90-gallon. Okie doke. Wish the directions on Fritz ICX didn't have a blue background. I don't know. I haven't seen their ICX. I haven't looked at it much. Like this one has a blue background too. Blue to orange, but this is Aquarium Solutions. All right. Safeguard for treating Hydra. In your experience, is it safe for fish? And does it treat internal parasites as well? Well, Safeguard is typically fenbendazole, which is very similar to flubendazole. It just doesn't dissolve into water as well. So yes, in my experience, it's not that harmful to fish, but the dosing recommendations are few and far between and sparse and guessing at best. So that's where, depending on what directions and whose method you're following, is how invasive it is. And I've seen things, I've seen someone use 10x the recommended dose and nothing die. I've seen someone use 1/10 the recommended dose and it still treat the water. And so, we need to find something that really is repeatable, and lots of testing needs to go into it. I think in my fridge I still have the goat dewormer that is flubendazole, so it's already a liquid state, which would be the same kind of active ingredient as fenbendazole in the Safeguard. But it needs, part of it is it needs someone to really do tons and tons and tons of testing and then share that with someone who can get the word out, and they can repeat the results. And whether it's a manufacturer, whether it's a YouTuber or a blogger or whatever it's going to be, someone that's trusted in the industry. But it's a lot of work, and no matter what you do, we find it all the time, like people don't trust my Med Trio. They assume it's, oh, I just do it because I make money. It's like, well, I actually make more money at our retail store if we don't. If you kill fish, you buy more, right? So it's it's a lot of labor to figure something like that out. It's for the greater of the hobby, but usually won't translate to any money for you. So that's why there's not a ton of people really working on it. Rusty's asking if I discussed cottonmouth or neon tetra disease. Cottonmouth, a little bit. It's a bacterial fungal infection combo. I treat it with both ICX and Maricin. So the ICX will take care of the fungus growth, which part of the problem, people always get hung up like it's called ICX. It only treats ick. Like, no. It doesn't just treat ick. It does other things too. So that treats the fungus. And then when you treat the fungus, you leave behind a bacterial infection. That's where the erythromycin comes in. If you didn't have live plants, you can use salt. It hits both of those. And when it comes to salt, our recommendation is typically start with 1 tablespoon per 3 gallons, as long as you don't have live plants. And then after about a week, if the symptoms aren't getting way better, then move it to 1 tablespoon per 2 gallons. And we actually go all the way to 1 tablespoon per 1 gallon in extreme situations where meds wouldn't work beforehand. But do know how salt works and how it doesn't evaporate. It doesn't it doesn't lower in intensity. If you change water, the amount of gallons you take out is how much you treat for when you go back. So if you have a 100-gallon tank and you do a 50% water change, you only put salt in for the 50 gallons that go back in, not for the whole 100 gallons. What about Lifeguard? Lifeguard, I've got experience with it with deworming puffers, and it usually is too harsh to use with a lot of fish just in putting it into the tank. That's where I don't recommend that med that often. So because it's not safe for everything, so that makes it hard. The hardest part is when like an Oscar or an African cichlid, they're so strong of a fish, they can take so much. And then you get to something like maybe a panda loach or something, and they're not robust. And so that same med just murders them. Like, oh no, what have I done? And a great example of that in our care, we were trying to really figure out could we recommend salt for everything when meds basically get outlawed? And the answer is 98% of things respond really well to salt, but like dwarf anchor catfish, in a 10-gallon tank, you put like 1 tablespoon, they just start keeling over within like 4 minutes. So we learned that some species of stuff is just way more sensitive to certain things like salt or a different med. I mean, we haven't seen any that like of the meds we use, you put that in, like it kills them, because we'd notify people. But even things like like the easy carbon, while good for most plants, can be hard on like vallisnerias and some mosses and some allergies. So it's hard to get a product that just does well for everyone, and that's the hardest part. Does Maricin work better than ChemiClean for blue-green algae? I went through a ChemiClean treatment, and I see a bit of blue-green left, and the funk is still kind of there. I don't know. So I haven't done any A/B testing versus ChemiClean versus blue-green, or versus like Maricin or erythromycin, because Maricin and erythromycin's always worked really well for me, and I always have it in my kind of medicine cabinet to treat fish, where I don't always have ChemiClean. And so it might work just as good, might work better, but I don't know, because this one works. And that's what I would say about a lot of these meds. A lot of times people go, well, what about this medicine? Does this work? Will this treat ick? And the answer is, I have no idea. Because ICX works so well for me, I don't go and test all these other meds unless, it is like this herbal remedy or something like that, or they're really asking me to, or whatever's gonna, happen there. So for sure, there's other meds that work really well. I just don't happen to use them, and they might, like a lot of meds like Copper Safe and anything copper-based is really good at treating a lot of parasites, except it's really good at killing plants and snails and shrimp. So it's not that it doesn't kill the parasite, it's that it kills some things we want to keep around as well. And the way I do meds for my business, which we're all planted tanks and, that's what, and inverts, right? So all the meds that I use and recommend have to be safe for that. And so salt is safe for the most part for snails and shrimp, not in super high levels, but a lot of the nerite snails can take a lot of salt. A lot of the shrimp can take a lot of salt. And in fact, at one point we were testing L-biopsidae with salt. We could take the salt crazy high, and it never got rid of L-biopsidae. So there's lots of testing with a lot of organisms to see what works and what doesn't work, and it's not always clear cut, unfortunately. That is the hardest part. Because even if we get a little bit of success, like, oh, this is great for this type of fish, that gets lost in translation, where it's like, oh, it worked really great, and then I tried it on this fish and it was a bloodbath. Like, oh, well, you can't use it on that fish. That becomes a problem. Clint McLaughlin, yeah, and David Eberhardt, thanks for becoming part of the team. What's the equivalent of Paragard in our trio of meds? Well, in my opinion, nothing, because Paragard has never worked very well for me. It's one of those meds, so like, of the meds that people really love, Melifix, Pimafix, Kenomycin, and Paragard, and Copper Safe. Those are like the 5 that people are like, I swear by these. And I routinely go through and test them, and they don't work as well as the meds I use. So for me, what is the equivalent? So I would say, what do I use instead of? I use ICX instead of Paragard. So, but I really want Paragard to work, because it seems so easy and preventative, and like, yeah, if it did what it said it does on the bottle, it seems amazing, but it doesn't. So, or at least in my care, with my water and the types of fish I keep. It might be great in saltwater, might be great in hard water, might be great with African cichlids, but the style of fish keeping I do, it does not resonate with my style. So that's where it doesn't have a direct. I have tested it quite a bit though, because I've had employees swear by it, and then we get in and we're like, okay, if you're swearing by it, and then we test in the store, and a lot of times they'll have success at home. They're like, well, the only thing treated this and this and this was Paragard, and I go, great, and they're like, we're having this problem at work, and this is not treating it, so I'm going to bring in Paragard, I'm going to treat it. And then we do, and it doesn't work. And I'm like, all right, see, like, you know, and when we test them, we're testing on so many things over so much stuff that you find faults or success really quick. When you're like, oh, we treated 15 different types of fish and none of them got better. Like, that's 15 failures right there. Where at home, you treat one thing, it worked, and then you go, hey, this medicine works, and then a year later you try it again, and maybe it does or doesn't work, but you're only getting a few samples. And sometimes just changing the water and doing some of these things are what's going to clear up the fish anyway. You know, so one thing you can do, like if a bully was causing the damage in your fish and you put enough meds in there till everyone feels like they've got the flu, that solves the problem in the fact that the bully can't be a bully, but it's not the meds that actually fixed it. It was the bully needed to stop. So there's always like what we do and then a reactionary effect. And sometimes there's a placebo effect going on there. Like one of the reasons API Melifix and Pumifix sell really, really well is the first thing people say is it smells like medicine. And therefore, they're in the right mindset that this is going to do something. But it's the water changes and that kind of stuff that really does it, in my opinion. Does ICX really stain your silicone? Yes. That being said, go watch any of our store tours. Every tank in there has had ICX 100 times, 500 times, an insane amount of times. But it always dilutes over time. So it'll be slightly blue. Every tank in my fish room has had it as well, you know, including this tank several times. So yes, but it tends to be a very light staining. At the very first time, sure, it's going to seem pretty dark, but as it gets exposed to more water, yes, it'll lighten up. If blue-green algae is blue-green algae cyanobacteria? If so, black the aquarium out. That is one way you can do it, but typically, like with our style of fish keeping, we have lots of live plants, and it takes 7 to 10 days to black out to kill cyanobacteria. That's pretty hard on your plants. And before that, I would recommend taking as much of it out as you can, because once you kill it, it becomes a source of ammonia. I've got ick right now on loaches and neon tetras, higher temp and salt, 5 milligrams per 10 gallons. I don't know how much 5 milligrams is. I don't know. I use tablespoons as my measurement, so I don't know that math easily. Plus ICX twice daily. Can't get rid of it the second week. Why? From just using ICX twice a day and the higher temps and salt, you've, in my opinion, made a recipe for them to be crazy stressed out. So, like, I would back off. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say I get the flu tomorrow, and then all of a sudden it's like, we got to get you better. We're going to run you off to the hospital. We're going to run all these tests. We're going to put you on all these meds and do all of that. And it's like, well, if we had almost done nothing, I would have gotten better in a few days. But you now have done so much, and my immune system is so low because I'm so exhausted. It's actually going to take longer. But without seeing pictures, maybe you've misdiagnosed. B, if it's really been 2 weeks and you're dosing twice a day, probably ICX isn't going to get it. But, you know, dosing 2x a day, that's a very harsh treatment. So I don't have lots of experience with it because I never saw great results in dosing that heavy that often. So I would kind of go back to basics here and go, okay, what's a good approach here? You know, when you say higher temp, is that 90? Is that 85? Is that 82? Is it 80? Right? So, and then salt at 5 milligrams. I wonder how many, well, it'll depend for milligrams. Like, is it coarse salt, fine salt? But on loaches and neon tetras and stuff, you know, if you had a temp of like 85 and a tablespoon per 3 gallons, after about a week, you should probably see most of that ick subside. But yeah, with what's going on there, that seems rough on the fish currently, and it could be causing a lot of stress. Does the co-op carry green spotted puffers? No, we don't. We don't sell anything that's not freshwater. All right. Will salt treat internal parasites? I don't believe it will. Well, let me back up. I don't know that it will. I suspect that it wouldn't because I don't think we can necessarily get the concentrations high enough in there to do it. And at the levels I've done, I've never really seen it cure internal tapeworms. So we might be able to bring it up high enough, but at the levels that I'm willing to go, I've never been able to do it myself. So, but maybe I was right there, like, oh, just a little bit more, I would have got there maybe. I can't say. For an experienced fish keeper, what would your complete deworming process be? I've gone over that in my puffer videos. I think there's a puffer live stream, but basically it's about 6 months of deworming is the most important part there, and that is using multiple methods. I use both, like Paracleanse as a start. Do that for once a month for about 3 months. Then after that, do a couple of treatments of levamisole, and then keep monitoring feces. And then after that, if you didn't get it after that, then I would do some flubendazole in there. But usually you've cleaned it out by then. But definitely give a lot of recoup time, at least 3 weeks in between. Keep it eating really well. And yeah, because once they get moody and they stop eating, not good. Hello, Andrew Baker. I've been in the hobby for 30 years and this guy's on point. It's only, 30 years in the hobby is probably equal to like 3 years in a store. You learn very quick at a store just because, as you can imagine, like as people have questions here, imagine that all you do every day is you go to work and people line up to go, my tank's having a problem, how do we fix this? Or I'm new to aquariums, how do we start? And if you do that every day, 40 hours a week for years on end, it doesn't take that many months before you're like, oh, you've got ick. Yes. Well, I've been here for a year. I've helped someone treat ick every day, every time I've worked. So now I've been successful at treating ick maybe 90% of the time over the course of 200 cases. You extrapolate that over years, and it's like, oh, you start getting into thousands and thousands of cases of ick, and you've helped, and you've got the results and where they went wrong. And so yes, if you ever really want to amplify your hobby, go work at a fish store, and you are forced to learn because you want to help people. So it's a fun thing, but also frustrating when things don't go well. When you say salt and temp, you're talking about aquarium salt, and how much salt can bristlenose take and how high of a temp? So everything in moderation, right? We have been able to take salt up to a tablespoon per gallon with bristlenose plecos. We have been able to take them up to 85 degrees. I don't think we've ever taken both of those up, though. I don't think we've ever put them at 85 and that much salt. So there's always going to be some give and take there. But I always recommend start with the least amount of salt. Start with 1 tablespoon per 5. Then go to 1 per 3. Then go to 1 per 2. Then go 1 per 1. And kind of take that, like 1 per 5 is like really mild. But 1 per 3, give it like a week. Is that making a difference? If not, then go to 1 per 2. That's the second week. And then the third week, go to 1 to 1. And if you can't get it with, those two and you go to that 1 to 1, there wasn't a lot of hope left for you anyway. But in general, mild doses of salt and then high temp can work. And the way salt works when you're treating ick, by the way, is it dehydrates. So when you change the salinity of water, the freshwater organisms, both fish and the ick parasite, they have less salt inside their bodies, and so it's going to pull fresh water out from them. And at the right salt level, it basically pulls enough salt out of the ick that it dies, and it dies before the fish does. So it's pulling water out of the fish too, and you can dehydrate a fish. But the goal is that the small parasite gives out way before we would dehydrate a fish enough to kill it. So kind of crazy to think about dehydrating something underwater. All right. I work in a pet food store. I understand about trying to help and wanting to help. I respect your effort or experience and efforts. Yeah, I mean, most people, the interaction starts, everyone wants to do best by their pets for the most part. They want to protect their investment, they want to protect their pet and all of that. And you have to find creative solutions sometimes. Oh, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to gravel vac. I'm not willing to change water, or I'm not willing to do some of these things. So sometimes you got to get creative, and I try not to fault those people because I'd much rather have someone tell me I'm never going to change water than say, yeah, teach me how to cure this illness, and changing water is part of the plan. And if they don't change the water, this is not going to work. So if you come to me and you're like, I'm never going to change water, how can I pull this off? Like, oh, all right, well, we could try meds, and then, okay, we'll use some Purigen or some carbon to take those out eventually. Okay, what else could we do? Like, you can actually start putting your mind to, how can I get around this obstacle? And honestly, sometimes it's more fun for us anyway, of like, all right, this isn't just ick number 279 of the month. Okay, I got some limitations here. Okay, how am I going to get through that? But sometimes it is annoying where you're like, oh, you won't spend any money and you won't do any work. How are we ever going to, how are we going to solve this if you won't do anything? But yes, it can be challenging, especially when most often the biggest problem is the customer not noticing something. Like, are you sure you don't see this? Like, it's so weird that, you wouldn't be seeing this going on. And then sometimes I always ask for pictures, and you're like, it's right here. You can see it right here. Great, now we can treat this. But if you can't expect someone to know what they don't know. And so if they don't know what ick looks like, how do they know if it's ick? And most commonly, people come in like, my fish have ick. And they're like, oh, let's help you treat ick. And then you find out it wasn't ick at all. It was just like, no, your fish had fin rot. And then you'll find that like 20% of the population thinks that all fish illnesses are just called ick. Like, oh, that kid's got ick. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, he had a cold. Ick, You're like, no. Ick's a specific thing. So your fish actually had fin rot. That's why IckX did not treat fin rot. And so you have that where you end up playing detective, like, I do a lot of that when I was at the store. A lot of that, like, you're kind of checking out, like, just so we're sure, you do know that ick would look like salt on a fish, right? And that, like, it's a specific disease and not just like a word for all diseases. And 8 out of 10 times, like, hey, of course it's ick. Like, okay, yeah, just wanted to check, because we do have like 20% of the people that don't know that, and we want to stop them before they leave the door so that we actually can help this fish. All right. Am I coming to Aquashella Dallas? I am not. I'm not going to Aquashella Dallas, and mostly because I'm going to Germany. So they did want me to go, and they offered to pay for my flight and all of that. But it's like, basically, Aquashella happens on the weekend. I think it's like May 16th and 17th. But the Germany event I want to go to, which we're staying for like almost 2 weeks, starts the 19th or something like that. And they were like, well, you could just leave Sunday night, fly straight, and land while it's going. And I'm like, that sounds hard. By the time you shake hands with 7,000 people, you kind of get sick, and you're going to be jet lagged, and you have to pack enough clothes for that weekend, and then like tear down the booth and ship that home, jump on a plane, go to Europe. And so I decided not to. And so really, we're focusing a lot, I say we, my wife and I, spending more time with our dogs and our friends and that type of stuff. And, so we have Valentine's Day plans and stuff like that. And, our dogs are getting old, and I've talked about this before. Sassy's very old. If you're watching our stories on your mobile device, if you have a mobile device that has YouTube, you can click on our story. You see that we were walking our dogs, and Sassy's like in this little baby carrier because she's getting really old. And, it's, for lack of a better term, it's like that old relative you have. That, like, you wouldn't be shocked if next month someone says, like, oh, they were getting old, they passed away in their sleep. And Sassy's at this point, too, where we wouldn't be shocked if something happened, like, oh, we're not looking forward to it, but we know we want to spend time with our dogs. And part of it is, you guys probably have seen that, like, a lot of talking head videos are coming out. That's what I call them, when it's like kind of live stream format. I talk and I educate, or I talk about something, and there's not so much like, what are you doing in the fish room, and why don't you go visit your friends, and why aren't you in Dean's fish room, and why isn't this happening? And it's because we've been traveling a lot. And so if we dial down the travel, then I can dial up the projects and the things I want to test. So like, I've had meds I need to test for like 2 weeks, but it doesn't make sense to be like, let me treat the 800 gallon and fly out, and then they all die and I come back and they're all dead. So that's the thing. We're trying to travel less, and there's specific trips we want to go on, but the goal is less trips. And I've got another one coming up next month. I go to Virginia to give a talk. I forget, it's something basically by like, I want to say the gist is like, for lack of a better term, like how Aquariumcoop became this thing and now that we're this big or whatever, right? So I've got to design a talk and, you know, funny stories and all of that. But yeah. Are any of our staff going to Aquashella? No. So what probably isn't seen and is going to come off the wrong way, but even if flights are paid for and we get a free booth, on average, Aquashella costs us $10,000+ from the stuff we're giving away, from just fees of shipping more stuff there, multiple employees being there, losing all the weekend, us not pushing forward in business, me having to get videos ready before we go, catching up when we get back. And so, you know, the other part is we've spent a lot of money. And so personally, the way I feel is if the goal is to connect with the fans, and that is my main goal when I go to one of these conventions, I think it makes more sense for us to go visit local clubs. Yes, we're going to see less people at one time, but, you know, I went to Dallas last year. I've been to Chicago like 5 years in a row, sometimes multiple times in the same year. And so, like, when I'm looking at, okay, I want to connect with fans, right? Virginia, never been there, right? California, haven't been there in like a year, and California is one of our biggest demographics. Like, maybe I should go to Illinois. Maybe I should go here. Maybe I should go there. And so if the trips, you know, I'm going to schedule some trips, I think I'm going to do that as opposed to some of these same things. And I've been talking with them, and if they could make it travel more, I think that'd be more beneficial. Like, oh, put one in Vegas, put one in Alabama, put one, you know, like move this show around, and I would get to see more people. But literally last year, we had people that attended both Chicago and New York, and it was like, hey, saw you last weekend, is what they're saying to me. I'm like, yeah, I know. And well, good time, and I want to hang out, but the goal is to kind of meet and greet more people and help people and get around and accomplish all the things, I guess. All right. With all the technology out there, tests would be possible to test for ick, bacteria infection. Not that I'm having any issues. Yeah, that would be great. I just don't know at what level at home we could do that. Well, okay, so here's the reality. Like, maybe a microscope at $4,000 can actually identify all of those. It's just, you know, not scalable yet. Whereas, like, maybe the next iPhone or the next someone develops a microscope essentially that can clamp onto here and like, oh, it's 100x or whatever, and then maybe we get that functionality. You know, I would have never thought we could have accomplished what we're accomplishing with phones and technology that we did even 10 years ago, right? So maybe we have that, but for now we don't. Yeah, so someone asked, any national organizations to join that provide details on upcoming events or make similar announcements? Not really. It used to be like TFH magazine kind of handled that. Maybe what's that other magazine? Brain fart. Amazonas. They were doing it for a while. It's hard because a lot of events change dates quite often, and so you do a lot of maintenance work of like, oh, they changed this and blah blah blah. So I know our events that we attend are posted on our Facebook under our event schedule. They also go out in every newsletter. By the way, if you're not signed up for our newsletter, you should be. We sent out, I think today. It's either, maybe tomorrow? Today or tomorrow? We're sending out an article that's written by Chris Lukup, the Shrimp King. So a ton of stuff about shrimp. That's going to be going out. And we're working on a lot of that. So if you're only consuming us on YouTube, you're missing out on quite a bit of what we do. We have really expanded what we do in terms of like physical writing and guides, like we were doing infographics, and now that I'm kind of home base is back at home, you know, so this sounds crazy to me that I'm about to say this, but now that I get to stay home 3 out of 4 weeks out of the month, I can actually work on some of this stuff. So I want to get back to doing live streams maybe on the weekend on Facebook, and I want to start doing some more stuff there. I want to start doing maybe some stuff on Instagram again. I know I've got more stuff to build out in here that I want to do, and all of that just takes time. You know, I've got some ventilation fans that are actually sitting right over here to make sure this room stays correct temperature, right? So if you watched the last video, you noticed we were having some temperature issues in here. I want to better regulate the temperature all around, so we're using some inline fans that have variable speed controls to handle that. And so I'm actually looking forward. Tomorrow, all wrapped up in, I've got some meetings, and tonight I have meetings with Robert, and then we have Valentine's Day, but then Saturday, ooh, we're back to playing. And I really caught the fish bug again, working on Zenzo's fish room of Tazawa's tank. So if you haven't checked out that video, when we were in San Francisco, all the extra time that was spent there, I didn't go visit fish stores or anything like that. We were building, or not building, but installing extra stuff in his fish room. Dean did a majority of the work. Zenzo did a lot. I mostly paid for it all. Like I did some work, but I don't want it to make it seem like, you know, I was doing an insane amount, because I still had a lot of work to do. My workload is still very high, and I'm still working on lowering it, but there's a lot of social media stuff to interact with. I have teams of people I have to proof stuff for. Like every video that comes out, every blog article, all that stuff has to go through multiple iterations, and ooh, that's not, I don't agree with that. Like that's not what we actually think, and is that the right tone and all of that. So I still work on that, and even like, you know, I am consulting some other YouTubers and stuff, so I have to proof some of their stuff late at night, going, okay, I think you could tweak that a little bit, you'll get a little bit better, you know, focus on this next time. And so yeah, I was kind of morale, and you know, oh, grab the other side of this, you know, big aquariums, we had to move them and stuff. But check that out, it came out really well, and I think we're gonna watch Zenzo's content just go through the roof, because I know what happened to me when I started redoing this. It got me invigorated to do more. And because I was working in Zenzo's fish room, now I'm invigorated to play with my fish. He had a guppy tank that I fell in love with. Like, yes, I've got guppies, but he really fell in love with the guppies there. And I thought that was really cool. I liked his mud skippers, and he did some projects that I hadn't seen the videos of. And I was like, wow, that's genius. I want to make one of that. So I actually ordered the stuff up, and I'll be making it, and just, you know, I'm not going to make a video on how to do it, but I'll be like, watch his video, because he taught me. So I'm looking forward to playing around in the fish room. So that's travel less, play more. That's what I'm trying to do. All right. Any apps for freshwater hobbyists on tracking water changes, filters, chemicals, med dosing dates? I saw one for saltwater, but not for fresh. I'm sure there's gotta be, but all the ones I tested were just kind of like, meh. I mean, I know there's a ton for a desktop computer, but I don't know. I know there's some that have been like in tests that I've tested, but I never know if they went to actual print, if you will. Yeah, I feel like I would use like a OneNote or a Todoist or some kind of like note-taking app, just hack around it and just like make each one a different tank. I think that's what a lot of people are doing. So. Will our brand ever come to the UK? We were discussing it yesterday, you know. So we were doing projections on, you know, 3, 5, 10 years out of Aquariumcoop. What does that look like? And what volume would we have to be at where it makes sense to open a second warehouse? And, you know, would it go in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Illinois or like somewhere else in the United States? And I think my takeaway was I would rather launch in the UK before we have a second warehouse in the United States. And so, yeah, maybe that happens in 3 months or 3 years, or I don't know. It's not like super short on the roadmap. We're still shoring up a lot of stuff to go on in Canada. So we're still focused on that. I mean, obviously we're focused on the United States the most because that's where our base is, but we're also working on Canada. And at some point, I believe that the UK is a good launching point into Europe. But I don't know, I don't understand all of the steps we'd have to get there yet. Like, there's a lot of steps to go into Canada. I'm sure there are just as many, if not more, to do the UK as well. Do I still have to do a vacuum the 800 gallon? They seem like they're natural vacuums. So I haven't been, but I do, like, if I was to take a close-up video, you guys could see they only go about a ½ inch down. And so either A, I need to get rid of some substrate, or B, I need to add fish. And, well, fish to like Corydoras or like some dojo loach, something that really wants to get down in there. And right now I'm in this conundrum of, do I want to downsize my goldfish and keep them like in a 125? So I'd keep less, you know, not the same amount, but I'd keep some less in a 125 in the fish room. And then do I bring Ladybird, the Mabu Puffer, out here? Like, that sounds really cool because she's getting bigger, and at some point that's going to have to happen. Or do I add more fish into this with the goldfish and, make that a little bit easier on maintenance level? So I don't know. I go back and forth. I want to test that med in here and figure it out. Any given day, like if the internet's like, every time I put out a video, you're like, your goldfish, they're doing terrible. And it's like, you didn't see that one. That one's blind as a bat. I need to do surgery on it or something, to fix that one. And even in the video where I'm like, oh, these fish are too warm, they're like, hey, you should check those fish are too warm. Like, literally, the video is about that. Like, keep watching. I don't say that to them, but that's what I'm thinking. And so, I do like them as a backdrop. They're big and fluffy, and I enjoy goldfish. Like, I'm not going to get rid of all of them because I still enjoy goldfish. But I do want to plant some more. So regardless, I'm going to plant some more plants in there, and I need to start them in my fish room because these guys like to pick at them. I tried it a couple times, and they won't leave them alone. So if I get them started, better. But regardless, the way this looks is going to change. I think I'm keeping the goldfish for quite a while, unless, one thing, because I'm trying to spend more time with family and all of that, if we remove Ladybird from the living room, we can put another couch in to have more friends over. Because right now we have one couch, really, and that's great for my wife and I and our dogs. But if we want to entertain some people over, we don't really have great places to sit because we have a 230-gallon aquarium right where that couch should go. So, but we don't have extra aquariums that would house Ladybird at the size she is. So, but, we could do musical chairs. Ladybird goes in here, goldfish go into 125. Everyone's super happy. And I don't think you guys would be sad to see Ladybird because Ladybird is awesome and she hams it up. But there's always that chance that you put Ladybird in here and then she just always hides in the back corner, like she gets mopey or something. And be like, dang it. So we'll see where we go with that. And I've, making some more changes and playing around. And that's the biggest thing, is the fact that I actually want to do something is a great mindset for me to be in. Because normally I'm like, it's fine, leave it, I don't care, like I enjoy it. But now I'm like actively thinking like, what do I think is gonna look best? What do I want to look at? And that's a great spot for me to be at. Did I add the giant Corydoras into the 800-gallon yet? No, I haven't. They're still hanging out with the rare whiptail cats I brought back from Peru. There's a lot that's gonna go on in that fish room, hopefully in the next week, where I consolidate stuff, get rid of some stuff, make some new tanks, make some new setups, plant some more plants. There's a bunch of stuff I want to go on in there. And I just gotta, I gotta spend some time thinking about it and, go, what is it I want? So I know what I want. Let me see. I probably can't find the picture. Let me see if I can find a link to what I want. Let's see here. It's an image that I have held in my brain for 10 plus years. And this might be exciting for you guys. I don't know. But if I can find it, this is what I consider to be the best fish room on the planet. And it's a very specific picture. And I shouldn't say I've never gotten close, because I have gotten close before, but not 100% close. I can't find it. I'm going to find it. If I don't find it here real quick, I'm going to spend some time, probably tonight or tomorrow, because I got to have a meeting, but I'll post it on the community page. If you're not following on the community page, you should, because I post there like every day. And that's just on YouTube. You go to community and we're talking about stuff. But it's not what you guys will think, because you guys will think something super high tech and just like amazing, looks like $1 billion. It is very nature oriented and something I think is achievable by everyone. And I've always lusted after this one fish room. I should see if it's still around and go tour it. I just have always, I'm not seeing it. But I know it pops up when I look for different things sometimes. I want to say they even use cinder block stands, but I could be wrong. But I probably run into it once a year and I'm like, that is the definition of the perfect fish room, I think. And Yeah, where planted, maybe planted aquarium fish room. And here my mechanical. Oh, here it is. This, okay. Let me see if I can get this to pop up, and I will show you guys. Oh, I can't do this on the fly. This is gonna be terrible. Let me see if I can just get the picture. And I'll still post it. I'll post it on the community page as well, but let me put it into chat for you guys. This picture, the top picture on this website, is what I consider to be the perfect fish room, in my opinion, for everyone. And I get it, you could put different fish in there and that kind of stuff, but when I see this, and I've been looking at this for ever since I got into the hobby, I just thought this was exactly what I wanted. Like, I could be in that fish room forever and never get bored of it. It was just, it's the shining star. It's the, what has Corey been, trying to achieve his whole life? And this is really where I want to take my fish room. And if I'm halfway thinking behind this right here, there's barn doors. If you haven't been around for a long time, you don't know that, but there's barn doors. I kind of want to build it in a greenhouse as well, because I really love sunlight, but here it is. In that article, the top picture, I consider this fish room to just be the best. And I don't know why. Like, I think part of it was I completely fell in love with the idea of this is 500% attainable by me. There's live plants everywhere. There's not fancy lighting. It looks good. You can see the rugs on the ground. Like, I don't know. I really fell in love with this. And, keep in mind, this tank or this fish room is probably so that's from 2006. It could be from, 2000 or 1998. And, I think that fish room was actually started maybe in the 70s or something. Yeah, but that is what I consider, that is my happy place and where I want my fish room to be. And that's what I've been working towards, is I want all of my aquariums to be lush green with fish living in it, and each one being its own little environment. Instead of right now, I've got like a bunch of breeding projects, yes, but I want the plants and the breeding project. And so a lot of my tanks, they're filling up with a lot more green, and I'm working on different things. But, trying to like get more goldfish into here. They ate a bunch of my plants in one of my tanks, so I'm going to redo that whole tank there because they ate the mosses, basically. And, it was good for them, so, yeah. But yeah, so that's, and I think part of it is like money can't buy that. That's just someone's time. Someone spent, I could buy all the supplies to do that. I own a warehouse that has everything to do that. But that takes 3 years of everything growing in and just it looking better and tweaking and modifying. And yeah. What do I feed the Pleco in the 800 gallon? Is it a common? It is a common. Not really too much anything special. I've been traveling so much, so a lot of pellets go in. He eats a lot of algae, which, full disclosure, that's not enough. But these water pigs don't really allow, like if I put a chunk of rapashi in there, they're all over it. And so I find him feeding on a lot of their feces, which I think is similar to what they'd be kind of doing in the wild. That being said, I haven't found the best way to, bulk that guy up. Maybe I could do some zucchini. That might work. But he needs a lot of protein, not so much the veggie. So, I don't know yet. All right. For cooling goldfish tank, look into maybe Peltier plates. I don't know what that is, but I could look into that. Yeah, the temperature's come down quite a bit. It's actually doing pretty good. Not so much of an issue anymore now that we adjusted a bunch of things, but I'm still keeping an eye on it. Not saying that it's 100%, but it's doing a lot better than it was. So, yeah, definitely looking. All right. I didn't see the fish room we're talking about. I put a link in chat, so you'd have to click on that link. I'll put it in again there. So it's just a link that's sitting right there in the chat, and I will post it to community page later because I think it's super cool. Why do my rams keep swimming up to the top? Could have gill flukes, could have temperature high. Maybe there's not a lot of dissolved oxygen in there. Could be probably other reasons too. I don't know. A lot of stuff starts with play detective. Why would they do this? They don't do it at the store. Like, what could be going wrong? Like, if they didn't have enough air, they'd go up to the top. Wonder if do you have a way to test for oxygen? Or maybe it's warmer up there, right? So if you let your water stratify, then it's going to be warmer at the top. Whereas in a properly circulated aquarium, you shouldn't really get stratification very much at all. So, do medicate quarantine fish daily or just once? In the quarantine, we do it once for a week-long treatment. If it's an active infection, we do it daily. Feed the pleco in a pleco cave. That totally works if the pleco will go in the pleco cave. Right now, I've changed a couple things. He always loves to stay on the backside of the overflow. A lot of flow there, and I haven't found necessarily the perfect way to feed him. But we're gonna, do some changes in there, add some plants. Maybe I'll add some decor. We'll work on it. Is a Flu Ball 3.0 turned down to 25% equal to a Stingray? I think it's too much light for my 37 tall. I don't know if it's 25% really, but yes, the fact that you can turn it down works pretty good. Yeah. Which, by the way, they will be carrying a new Fluval 3.0 light soon. It's the one meant for 15 to 20 inch tanks, so it's kind of made. I'm not 100% on board with it, so just know that right away. But we can't not carry it when we carry the rest of the line. It's made so that it can fit a 10-gallon tank, which would be like the surface of the sun. But I think the better use of it is like on 18-inch cubes and stuff. Like that makes a lot more sense. So we are going to carry it, but it's still like $130 or $125. It's not cheap, but it does fill in everything under 24 inches. So we'll carry it. We probably won't sell a billion of them, but for the right tank with the right person, it is a great, great option. And so we will carry it. But I think under 24 inches Stingrays are a great, great light. In fact, even in my fish room, I'm converting some stuff to lower light where I have Flu Balls installed. We're actually going to revert back to Stingrays because I enjoy it with lesser light. The plants grow slower, the fish act differently, and especially with some of those wild-caught Peru fish, they really don't like the bright light. So I have it turned down as low as it'll go on the whiptail cats. Like whatever the Flu Ball light at everything like way down, that's where I've got that sitting. You can barely see into it, but they became way more active when I did that. So looking to, dampen it a bit. All right. Lost my male gardener Achille a couple weeks ago, but I was excited when some fry came out. Nice. Yeah, there's nothing better, I think, when you admit defeat and you're like, and from the ashes rises their offspring. I get another attempt. And somehow you feel better, like maybe you lost Dad, but you raised up 7 children. Now you're unstoppable, right? So that is totally what I want going on in my fish room, is just like everything pushing forward. I don't think I ever posted on the community page, but I did, when was it? Tuesday night? It was like midnight. I went on Aquabid shopping spree. I bought 4 lots of fish. So they'll be shipping out probably next week early, I would guess. So I got to get the fish room ready. It's always a good sign. If fish are coming to my fish room, means I'm getting ready, means I'm playing in there. And now that I don't have to go till March 7th on that talk, I got some time to play. So yeah, it was cool. The guy actually knew of Aquariumcoop and wanted to see if I needed anything else. He's got Molly that I want, actually. I won't tell you which kind because don't buy it yet, but you'll see him if I ever get him. He doesn't have enough to share right now, but he had some Mollies I wanted as well, and hopefully I'll be able to get some down the road. So I will say what I'm thinking in my mind. I'm like, does someone knowing who I am, do I get like more street cred? Like I wonder, will they try harder when shipping them, or like he probably is trying hard on all of them. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, he knows who I am. I think he won't take advantage of me, so I'm excited for that. Like, not that I was expecting you would, but I'm like, does that help or hurt me? I don't know. So, I'm excited though. 2 different, so technically 1 West African cichlid, 1 South American cichlid, and 2 different types of live bears. So running the gamut on that. All right. You know, people are talking about adding milk to an aquarium. You laugh, but back in the day, you added milk to add calcium to the water. Also, you can add milk to cycle an aquarium because it spoils and rots, and then bacteria has to digest it. So, you know, back in the day when I think I might have had more fun in fish keeping, and I might have been a better aquarist. And what does that mean? Like, not like I keep it at a certain level now, but in the past, when everyone had to be an observation aquarist of like, we don't know anything about aquariums. This might be in early 70s, right? Or 60s. And you're like, I don't really know anything other than water's magical and we try things that make sense. I might have been really good. Like I might have been towards top of the pile because I love to go, let's see if this does anything and observe. You know, where now I still love to do that. But technology really just goes, you shouldn't even be doing that. Technology, we figured this out. We know what's going on. But yeah, so milk was used back in the day. You know, you laugh, but it's been done. How long to quarantine? 1 week, 1 month? If you lose a fish or 2 while quarantining a group, does the countdown days start over again? That's a good question. How long it's up to you. So we do it for 1 week in the store. Then we put them out for sale. We still recommend people quarantine more at home. But if we quarantine for months, we'd never make any money. Now, if you lose a fish, first thing, do you know why it died? If it had a heart attack, you don't need to stop quarantine. If it died from ick, then you probably should restart quarantine. Really, it becomes an amount of time and then how much risk. So after a week of no illness, fairly safe. After a month, safer. After a year, safer. And so when you'll see like a fish farm, they might quarantine for a year before they bring something over to the main breeding facility. But at home, most people don't quarantine at all. They just throw it straight into their aquarium. So I think somewhere between like a week and 2 weeks is pretty optimal for the average home aquarist. That being said, the way I do it, like here in my fish room, is typically each aquarium is its own quarantine. So like those fish that I said I just bought, they'll go in there, but they'll be the only fish and they'll stay there forever until I get different fish. And I'll have sold them or brought them to the store. It'll sit empty for a few weeks probably, and then new fish will come in. So that's kind of its own quarantine type system there, but that's what works well for me because I have a lot of space to play around with that. All right. Would I use a Stingray light for 280 gallon, 5 foot by 30 inch front to back by 36, maybe it's 36 front to back, 30 tall? What would I do? I probably would now, you know, like, I don't think the problem is how strong the light is. I think it's coverage. So you kind of need like front and back lights. And so I would probably use like extra Stingrays to accomplish that instead of just like one really powerful flue ball light, just because I would probably want that coverage. But you could also convince me 2 pendant lights would create a really cool shimmering effect that I could fall in love with too. So it's lighting is definitely very much preference based, where if you ask Dean would just be like, I would run it like this. He runs it so dim. So like now that the cameras have adjusted, it's really dim in his fish room. And he loves it that way. Almost no algae grows, and he gets fish are more outgoing and that kind of stuff. So he really likes that look. And so it's a very personal choice. Oh, now it's all blown out and it's catching up. Whoa, I look bad now. Ugh, terrible. All right, well, we have about 1 minute, and I gotta go have a meeting with my store manager. And but I've got about 10 minutes. I'm gonna hang out in KG Tropical's live stream, and that's where we're all going. And the hashtag is hashtag I'd like to speak to the manager. Oh, that's a really long hashtag, but that's the hashtag. I'd like to speak to the manager. He won't know what's going on. It's pretty much my favorite trolling when I go live is, how am I going to make Lisa and John just go, what are they talking about? So hashtag, I'd like to speak to the manager. And that's who I got to go. I got to go speak with my manager. and make the retail store a better experience for everyone. Catch up, because that's what I do now that I'm back in town. So thanks for showing up. How many people did we have hang out? We had, I've lost track. We had 844 concurrent viewers. Not so bad at all, especially when we're talking about a dry subject called aquarium fish medications, which no one really gets jazzed about, but I guarantee long-term people are going to watch this because they're going to go, now my fish are sick, should have paid attention or should have tuned in. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for those who became a member. That helps us do stuff long-term. And maybe I'll do a little spinaroo of the fish room next week, or maybe while I'm working on it, and give the members only a little glimpse of what I'm thinking. Maybe I'll do an unboxing when those little fish come in. Who knows? We'll see what happens. And for now, we'll see a video on Sunday. I'll see you in the chat at John's or Katie Tropicals. # I'd like to speak to the manager.